You are once again driving it home with the professor. We're doing another hangout on air. Hopefully, Google at no point wants to charge me for this, because then I'll have to find another free service to uh, interview people. I have with me today Brian Palakow. He is by all accounts, a very successful human being. And what I say by that, I mean a human being. He's a family man, uh, owns and runs a successful business, helps a bunch of fighters, does announcing for MMA, is an MMA champion himself, and probably has some other accolades in his back pocket that I don't know about. So I present to you Brian Palakow, and he can tell you who he is, and then we're going to get right into it.
Well, thanks, Professor. Thanks for having me on the show. I've really been enjoying it. The last few have been great, so I'm looking forward to some of the people you have scheduled as well. But yes, Brian Palakow, again, pleasure to be on. Amateur MMA fighter, just about to turn 40, so the window is closing, you could say, as far as competing goes. But potentially, maybe one more as far as competing goes. Always helps motivate you to train a little harder as well when you know there's a chance to do one more. Actively running 2 businesses, both in the magnetics field. Something I definitely could get into because the way that I got into the business was wrestling. It's an interesting story, and I can get into it whenever we have time. But wrestling made a contact that I ended up working for the guy and then branching off and making my own business in magnetics. It's a niche business. And it's a lot of time and a lot of travel, like you said. But after 16 years, we're probably the #1 magnetizing company in the world, and we do a lot of work with companies like Apple and General Motors and things like that. So it is definitely a grind, like you said, the balance with the family. I'm married with 2 wonderful children, and then the dedication to training, like you said, and having MMA is kind of an outlet and a hobby. So that's just a little bit about me, I guess, as far as life. I have like the segments and the things and the hobbies, the passions, the business, the family. But when it all comes down to it, it's definitely it's a lot, but it's every day is great. So.
All right, so you're saying that a connection through wrestling got you into the businesses that you're in, and we can definitely get to that in a second. But just so that the fans and the viewers know, we tried to do this the other day while you were in Shanghai. Is that correct?
Yeah, Shanghai, China. I was there for 1 week.
You were there for 1 week, and oddly, the internet isn't as free as it is here in the United States, and we couldn't get it done.
No, I actually, certain things work and certain things don't, and I was advised by a friend that was there that due to some of the issues political that was going on, that these things were shut down. Instagram was shut down, and it made me appreciate being back in the States. I'll tell you that. I take those things for granted. So I didn't know. I had no web surfing, just email for the week. It was a little humbling.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting to try and make contact, and knowing that typically I spoke to somebody in California recently, somebody in Peru, somebody in Canada, and it was just easy. And all right, I'm going to talk to Brian, and no, I guess the sensors were working. Maybe this was too important to the Chinese government to not let this conversation happen.
I think that may be it. You're probably correct.
So your trip to China, you explained to me what it was a little bit, but you said it sounds like you work with some pretty small companies, Apple, General Motors. Do we have anybody bigger than those 2 that you might do some work with, or
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's like we actually can't get too into detail about what we do,
right?
But, for confidentiality purposes. But what my company is we, and again, this is not something that a lot of mainstream MMA guys would probably be able to get into or anything. But it's a passion of mine. We're a magnetics business resource, and you wouldn't believe how many magnets are out there. There's over 150 magnets in every car. So there's an example. Motors, drives, sensors, those are the things that we specialize in. So if a company is trying to target or design like a new motor or a new sensor or a new rotor or a new drive, they'll come to us with their goals. Their goals will be low cogging, great performance, and we'll work on the magnetic analysis and design equipment and the magnets to help them achieve that. and we work in the assembly line as well. And I was out on an assembly line in Shanghai with a customer, making sure everything was to their satisfaction. So it was quite a week.
I bet, and this is all kind of, I love technology, and I don't never really look into what goes past what I'm able to do. So kind of, it sounds like a lot of the cars that we're driving today, or some of the computers that we're using nowadays, wouldn't work as well or at all if it wasn't for companies like yours.
Yep, there's magnets in those headphones you had. So there you go.
Nice. All right. So I'm supporting the magnetic cause here.
So,
And you get to travel a fair amount, right? Is that correct, Brian?
I have 147,000 air miles this year.
What was that one movie? The guy wants to get 1 million and he gets
Yeah,
a super gold card or whatever.
Yeah, this last one, 15 hours back from Shanghai, was a little grueling. I've seen every movie on United's business class. I'm kind of getting tired of it. I'm going to try to pack it in for the year, but it's part of the job, and I get to see the world. I've been to a lot of places, not everywhere. There's certain places I haven't been, and maybe I will. Travel was a little more exciting when I was 25, and didn't really care where about getting home to my family. But it's definitely I make the most of when I get out there. I'm determined and I'm focused when I'm on the road for sure.
Now, when you're on these business trips, do you ever get the chance to take in the local MMA scenes where you're at, or is that something that's too difficult to do?
All the time. I try. I actually did look into, excuse me, Shanghai. I could only find a couple kickboxing gyms, but I mean, Shanghai is a whole other story in itself. How big and insane that city is. We sat in traffic for 6 hours one night. I actually got out and walked, and yeah, and I broke every traffic law. I'm glad I wasn't locked up, but I've trained in a lot of different places. Yeah, definitely, and that's always a humbling experience as well, because as you know, when you walk into a gym, not every gym has the same ethics or codes as other gyms. But I've been at Extreme Couture in Vegas, Vanderlei's in Vegas. I've been at Fairtex in San Francisco a few times. Some gyms out. I live with Dan Severn in Coldwater, Michigan for 2 weeks actually, and he's a lifelong friend of mine. We talk all the time. So
nice. The beast.
Combat Michigan Sports Camp out in Coldwater, Michigan. So there's a few places that I'm comfortable, and I would have no problem going to a gym, and I just check the internet and see what's around, or I network and talk to the guys. Hey, I'll be in Orlando. What do you recommend? And at this point, I'll probably not go too crazy with the sparring, if I don't know the guys, but I would definitely take classes or privates or train to the best of my ability.
So it's a good, you make a good point. You said you're going to be 40, or you're already 40.
I turned 40 in April.
You'll turn 40 in April. I'm 42, so I completely know what you're talking about there. So even when you're sparring at home, at your home gym, what are the kind of concerns that are different now than, say, 10 years ago?
It's a great question, and it's actually kind of one of the reasons when I moved up to this area. I live in the Collegeville, PA area. I'm 7 minutes from Nuk Moi, which is an outstanding gym. It's world class. But I had been at a couple gyms before that. I started out, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago at a hole-in-the-wall gym called Philadelphia Jiu-Jitsu, where I trained under Damon Umholtz and Ken Perry, who just recently passed away.
Yeah,
my Muay Thai coach.
Pretty well, so yeah.
He is a very, very good friend of mine. I mean, our stories go back forever. He worked at a local bar called Sugar Moms in Philadelphia. He's just a really great guy, and I miss him terribly. But I then, when I wanted to compete, I moved on to Daddis fight camps. And, I'm still great friends with all those guys. Brad Daddis, Bob Peach, Rick McCauley, who you know.
Yeah,
Matt Mikowski, and Jackson Galka all really took a lot of time and helped me greatly accomplish my goals. And I had a really good rhythm there as far as sparring, and you get to know your sparring partners. And I think when you know people, they'll push you to the limits, but they're not. I think you're less prone to injury. It's definitely something to be concerned about. So when I come to Nuk Moi, I was a little nervous. I said, man, am I going to have to go through this process again? And I was very lucky to get there and meet crew, Billy Algio, obviously Tim Carpenter, Joe Stripling, and those guys were great. Everyone at that gym was great, and I've had Sati, all the guys. I've never had a problem there. So I think that you have to be careful when you get to be our age. You want to avoid the head trauma. You really do. I see some of these guys who are young and they're sparring in MMA gloves 3 days a week, and I think that's a very, very bad idea. I've always limited the head trauma.
I think that's smart, number one, because you have a business and a profession that would necessitate you to stay sharp all the time, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I've been knocked out in training. It's happened. It's if you train as long as I have, it's impossible for it not to. But a typical camp for me would be 3 to 4 weeks of conditioning, yoga, working out and getting ready, jiu-jitsu all the time, wrestling all the time, and then get into about 4 weeks where 2 days a week maximum sparring, and then tailor that off to just Saturday if that's the day of the fight sparring. So
And,
you really don't get that many hard sessions in to where you're, especially with MMA gloves.
well, it's funny. I did the interview with Nate Quarry, and we didn't talk about this, but when I worked with Nate with some of his fights, I would pick his brain about how he would prepare and kind of the way he kind of set up his training. And he was very adamant about training being training and the fight being the fight. And you want to train hard and you want to get some sparring sessions in, but at a certain point of your career, the sparring becomes less important, as does the conditioning, the mindset, being healthy, because at the end of the day, it's time to perform in the cage, not during practice. Even though you want to perform during practice, obviously. But a lot of young fighters, I will say this, young fighters do need to spar a decent amount so that they get what? That they get used to getting hit, they get used to, seeing what the looks are. But it's pretty smart on your part that you've kind of through the good coaches that you've dealt with and self-discovery figured out that that's the way to go.
Yeah, and the other thing too is having the partners and the guys that you know. I mean, I don't spar with high-level UFC guys much at all anymore, but I was actually in one round with Tim Williams, and I was doing my best just to give him some work, and he had a clear right hand. He could have knocked me out, and he pulled the hand back. He did not hit me with it. So when you have guys who are at that level who are so good that they can even avoid injuring you, that helps as well, So that was great.
What do you tell your kids? You don't break your toys, right? If you break your toys, you don't get any more.
Right, yeah. So I remember looking at his hand and going, oh, and it did that. Luckily, that punch did not come. But guys like that, I've been training with several of Zoo's camps that he was in. I was one of his sparring partners and never had an injury with him. So you get to know your training partners. I think it helps. That doesn't mean you shouldn't cross train, but at my age, I'm hesitant to walk into I've done it before, and I had a tough time with it. I was in Arizona once with a couple high-level guys. I had trouble making through the 5-minute rounds in Vegas. I had trouble making. I took a lot of knees and did my best, and I was very humbled about it. But again, I think the head trauma can be very, very serious if you don't keep an eye on it.
Well, even the former, 170-pound champion, Johnny Hendricks, I mean, he's instituted that whole kind of safe sparring idea in his camp so that he can continue fighting and training for, longer than maybe some other guys. Now, I want to ask you, this is kind of, it's like Star Wars. We're at the end, and now we need to go to the beginning, right? So we've gotten to, your fights, and, we didn't talk about you being an amateur titleist, right? You hold the title for what organization?
I've won 2 amateur belts, XFE, amateur heavyweight champ, and I won the Asylum heavyweight championship last November. That was the November before this past one. That was my last fight. This was the first year I haven't fought in 6 years.
Okay.
Just wasn't able to work out. I have 2 injuries that I got to address. I don't know. It's always, am I going to get surgery and then train, or am I going to try to train and then get surgery? So, we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, there's so many other factors now. Fighting is not my life. It's not how I pay my bills. But there's definitely a love there. I love competing still, and I know there's not so much more that I can do. And that kind of was what really propelled me to get into the jiu-jitsu with the gi, because I had just never gotten into that. And looking and talking with Tim Carpenter, who's someone I look up to a great deal, kind of like a mentor of mine in the way that he carries himself. Always calm and confident. I feel that jiu-jitsu makes you better at everything, and that was something I want to do long term for the rest of my life. So.
Yeah, I don't know how 60-year-old boxers. I don't know how well they fare if they've been sparring for the last 30 years, but you can I believe you could grapple jujitsu anyway for a long time into an advanced age. But let's get back to the beginning. Let's go to episode 1 here. What got you started in the combat sports? Like, were you a wrestler? Did you do karate? Like, what got you involved in combat sports?
Big kid in junior high school, they throw you on the football team and the wrestling team, right, to see if you can stick it out. My first year wrestling, I was 0-7 in 6th grade, and then by 9th grade I had won the 9th grade title or whatever it's called. So I really loved it. I loved the identity. I loved having an identity as a young guy. Hey, I'm a wrestler. I'm a football player. Wrestling turned to work out really well for me. I got into it, but back then there was no light heavyweight. There was only 189 in heavyweight, and I was about 217 pounds when I was a senior. So all the guys were 275, and that did make it a little tough since they've instituted a 220 since then. So I wrestled in high school. I was ranked 5th in the state at one point, but I got a knee injury. I then went on to wrestle in college, but I never really achieved anything in college. I think my best year I won 9 matches in college. I got 2 varsity letters, one at Kutztown, one at Delaware Valley College. But, for me, when I was in college, I was always looking for something better instead of just making where I was at work. But I took that as a life lesson, which is something I'll never forget. So when things get hard, I don't look to run away to a new job or a new relationship. I'll try to make it work, and that's what I learned from running. I actually attended 4 different universities before I completed my undergraduate degree. But having that base really helped me propel. I had moved back to Philadelphia, and I wanted to, I had gained a lot of weight, and I said, you know what, I'm working. Let's get into what's out there. What's out there. And I was looking through Philadelphia, and I found a guy, Professor Joe. I can't remember his last name. The fireman in Northeast Philadelphia.
Joe Guido.
I went out there, and after 3 weeks of training at his place, I was lined up in a match with Hornion's son, Henner Gracie.
Okay.
I'm saying this right. And Henner Gracie ripped my arm out and separated my shoulder, and they drove me to the hospital. So, yeah, this is all. I have a picture of it, and that was kind of my introductory to competing in the gi. So I kind of had another bad experience at Team Hassett. I kind of threw away the gi and said, let's focus on catch wrestling and submission wrestling. And I think by about 2004. I did my first Naga, a no-gi, and won that, and then I kind of just kept progressing and said, let's keep training, and then maybe let's try to do a fight at some point.
So wrestling takes us to jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu takes us to grappling, grappling takes us into kickboxing, MMA, getting into the cage.
Yeah, well then I was living in Philadelphia, and that first place I told you about was so far away. I found Philly Jiu-Jitsu, which is run by a guy named Damon Umholtz. It's kind of a not real popular place, more of an underground. But Philadelphia Muay Thai was also there, and that's where I met Ken Perry and hit my first mitt. I had never thrown a punch in my life. Never. I think I may have hit 1 punching bag. So I started going to Muay Thai classes 2-3 nights a week, and then I ended up continuing on and doing that and learning and getting certified by Sakasem. There still weren't a lot of MMA fights back then, though. It was kind of still growing, the sport. But I was training. I was learning Muay Thai. We had a nice little group of guys. We would do a couple seminars every year. We had sparring on Saturdays to the guys that had their shorts. And it was a good base. But I spent many years on Cherry Street with those guys. And a couple of the guys that were there are some names you might know. Paul Felder was in that gym. He's now in UFC. Tom Backman was a guy who was there. He has fought professionally a few times. A couple of other names escaped me, but we had a good group of guys, and those guys moved on and went and did their own thing. But it was a nice.
Will Martinez was there for a little while. I know Noah Spear was there. Dan Haney. There's a bunch of local guys as well that that went through that gym. So some good talent.
It's funny. I forgot about Will and Jesus. You're right. They were there, and look how big they are now. So. Again, I had never really wanted to get into it from the business standpoint, but it propelled me into, a great start. It was a great place to start. But when I wanted to compete, Data seemed like a really good fit for me, and I was there for almost 5 years.
Okay. So I mean, for a long while there, that was the premier camp for MMA fighters, and we know how the climate of MMA changes from year to year, month to month. It's not that we're saying that that is no longer a premier camp, but there are other camps that come to the forefront. It's cyclical. And people move, people change, people leave. The ideas of schools change. They go from being hyper competitive to less competitive to hyper competitive again. But also fighters are fickle, right? They lose a fight or two, and what happens? Oh, my trainer didn't give me enough attention. My guy didn't do this. My sparring wasn't good enough. So, it's interesting because you've kind of touched on a lot of really very good schools and probably taken away some good experiences from every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've really never felt that I've been at a place that wasn't great. Really, the people around me. I mean, you always have a few students that come in and they never last. The people who can't follow the curriculum and have the discipline. I think half the battle is showing up on a regular basis and making the commitment, and that's in business and in athletics. So yeah, I think my experiences at Philadelphia Jiu-Jitsu with Damon, Philadelphia Muay Thai, Ken is a part of my heart, and again, it's just an emotional thing because he passed away. And then moving on to Dada's fight camps, where those guys took a chance on me. Something I'll add to you. When I had made this decision to compete, I had some experience. I had the Muay Thai, and I had the Naga win and a few things under my belt in the college wrestling, but I was out of shape. And I went to 3 gyms and said, hey, I have a fight lined up in 4 months. I have to lose 50 pounds, and I'm going to do it. And 3 of them said no to me. And,
Interesting.
yeah, they said no. They said we won't do it. And I understand that looking back now. But Jackson Gallica and Brad Daddis and those guys took a chance on me, and I'll always be thankful for that.
No, that's awesome, and I have a very good personal relationship with Brad, and he's an excellent martial artist and a good instructor, and a guy that really cares about his fighters and his students. So let's use that as a segue, since Brad is kind of like really from schools in this area of looking at professionals, right? And Brad runs a very professional mixed martial arts academy that caters to the beginners and also to fighters of the highest level. You've kind of done everything. You've competed at NAGA. You've done amateur MMA. But also, what's super interesting, and the reason why I have you on the show was a conversation that I had. I'm not going to name names, but with a couple people that I respect as high-level fighters and competitors. And we were talking about fight managers and people that help fighters. And the name that came up was yours. And they're like, he's the guy you want helping you. And I go, really? And I go, why? He goes, oh, he's not in it for the money, right? He doesn't need it. I'm not saying you're a millionaire. Hopefully you are, that you could be independently wealthy and not have to worry about these things. But they say he does it because he wants to, that's the guy you want. The guy that's not looking at you as like, well, he's going to make $4,000. I'm going to get $400, and how am I going to get my money back out of him? He's somebody that is like, hey, you know what? I want to help this fighter. So as much as all this other stuff is super interesting, going to China, the magnetics, your fight career, your college, and all this other stuff, when I hear 2 people that I really respect say the same name about one guy to say, hey, this is the guy you want helping you, guiding you in your career, getting the sponsors for you, setting up the matches, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, like, what do you get out of it? It's not the money, right?
No, absolutely. And the fighters that I manage for absolutely free. And I don't mind saying that. It's a relationship. When you love something, I love the sport of MMA. I was the guy that was going to 4 different West Coast videos to get UFC 1, 2, and 3. Like offering the girl $5 to hold it for me and everything. I also grew up in a time where guys like Randy Couture and Dan Henderson, I knew those guys before everyone else did. And I was so exciting to watch those guys compete. The point that I'm making is that I love watching the sport grow and watch it develop. I can remember a time when there was 1 fight a year, and now there's so much product out there. I have DVRs of 10 fights that I need to watch. I study the sport. I love the sport. I'm fortunate enough to have been commentating for almost 5 years now. with 3 different organizations. But I want to stay around the sport, and I don't think people realize how much fighters struggle, the battle that they have to endure. You know, the younger guys who need the discipline to train and have all their schedule lined up, it might help them. But these older guys who are trying to penetrate the threshold of what is the UFC and where there may be a chance to make some money, some of these guys have families or, you know, a job, and then they're in the gym twice a day. The schedules they keep are unbelievable. And, you know, these are the kind of people that sponsors should want, you know, to be representing them. These are the names that companies, you know, should be with, I feel. So it's the least I can do to help some of these guys, you know, in their careers. And I get joy out of it. When I see a guy that I've worked a little bit with, maybe consulted with him on how to tighten up his contract, or, you know, to do a little bit better organization with his sponsors, or put a little more money in his pocket, it makes me feel great. You know, it really does. And it ties me to the sport that I love. And, you know, when you walk into a room with good intentions, you don't have anything to worry about. You know, you feel very confident and very at ease. So my view on it might not be popular with the people who are in trying to generate revenue, but I'm not a threat to them. You know, I'm not actively marketing a management company. You know, if certain guys that need the help, I'll help. And I think my references are pretty good. The guys that I've worked with have done well. So it's a love for the sport and a passion for the sport. I mean, you can say you coach all these guys, Professor. When you see them succeed, that's an amazing feeling. You know, so just being a small part of that makes me feel good.
Well, you know, that's a big departure from some of the, for lack of a better term, scumbag managers that you come across when you're, you know, when you're dealing with people in the fight game. And I can only assume if we were in boxing, it'd be even worse, you know, because the numbers get even bigger in boxing. So it's refreshing to hear. What's nice in your case is that you have the latitude, because you are already a success in life. You're not trying to springboard into a successful life through MMA. So the help, what I've seen in the guys that I've talked to, the help that you give them, is like you're saying, is truly is heartfelt, but also in their best interest. And you use the word consultant, and I hadn't thought about that, but you really are an MMA consultant, right? You know, you could consult in a lot of areas.
And the thing is, like, I'll never get in the way of a coach. I want to add value to a fighter's career, you know. And I have to obviously balance a busy schedule and a lot of obligations. But, you know, some of these guys out there, you know, I don't know if a manager is really the best solution. I mean, for some guys maybe it is, but, you know, considering what the amount of the purse that they take, and, you know, what are they really, if they're guaranteeing them a certain amount of sponsorships, and, you know, that's going to be done, you know, you have to take a look at that. You know, what is the end result going to be? I think a lot of guys get excited because they want to sign a contract and have management. And, you know, I think some of these guys need to get some wins under their belts, and they could probably manage themselves with just some basic you know, fundamentals, and go on from there. So, you know, I don't want to say I have nothing against any managers really that are out there. I have no problem with any of them, but I really have a tough time taking $500 out of a guy who's getting 2-2. You know, if he wins, who's fighting 5 times a year or something like that, you know.
Right. And that's the thing, is that these guys are, you know, I think they think they're going to get rich $500 at a time, and that's not really how it works. But the other thing is that what I've seen is the unscrupulous managers make promises that they can never fulfill, right? And that's not what I've heard about you, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, you would need to have so many fighters fighting on a daily basis to generate enough revenue for the business to be profitable, and then you would have overhead and cost. And the other thing too is, you know, if you have 20, 30, 40, 50 fighters, how can you give those guys the attention that they need? You know, I mean, it would be extremely difficult to do that. So, I mean, I pretty much take a simple template to it. You know, you take a look at what are their goals short term, what are their goals long term. You know, are these practical goals? Where do they want to go? You know, fighting locally, not, you know, spending more money to get to the fight than you're going to make. I mean, you'd be surprised. It's not too difficult. And also the guys balancing. You know, don't quit your job and, you know, move out to LA to be an MMA fighter unless you have some substance there. You know, because, you know, making smart decisions. And a lot of these guys get really excited. I mean, you have to take a chance and go for it. There is really no guarantee. I mean, you've seen what some of the local promotions have done. There are some local guys getting into the big show, but I mean, what are the percentages? I mean, I think it's probably easier to get into the NFL than it is the UFC. You know, I mean, it's
and more lucrative.
yeah, exactly. You could get into the UFC and make $5,000 and never fight again. So it's a heavily debated subject. It's one that I'm interested in, and it goes back to the fighters really, the treatment of the fighters and the fighters making the money that they deserve. You know, I think it's a tough situation. I don't think the promoters are out to hurt the fighters. I think that they're trying to build a business, but it's just tough. It really is. You know, I mean, with these guys trying to watch them grow and get out there, it's a business that the guys have to balance a lot for them to be successful at, and that's what I try to help them with.
Well, and it's interesting because you're also you do commentating currently for Cage Fury. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've worked with New Breed Fighters, went on to XFE, and I'm currently with Cage Fury Fighting Championships. They have a lot of shows. They're definitely one of the biggest promotions in the East Coast, if not the biggest, probably. So they use different commentators, but I've worked 3 shows so far for them, and I just missed the last one because I was in China, unfortunately. So.
Well, what's really great about them is that they seem to be doing a good job of developing fighters that make it to the next level.
Yeah, I think Rob is definitely dedicated to the sport. I think he's very passionate about it as well. I think he loves MMA. I think he knows MMA, and I think that he's definitely trying to help the guys advance. You know, I definitely think that again, it is tough because you have the different shows, the different fighters. You can't imagine what these guys deal with the fighters falling off cards and the different problems that come in and the venues and all the different things that go into it. But yeah, I mean, if you fight for CFFC and you're in that, you're close to the next level. So I think it's a great organization that can what's the word, propel you to the UFC potentially.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, to me, it almost seems like part of the business model for them. It's like it's like, come fight for us, because if you're good enough, the UFC takes a look at our guys.
I definitely think they do. There's a couple other organizations. There's Anderson Silva's manager is out in Los Angeles. I know you know the guy's name. I'm drawing.
Yeah, RFA Fighting is what you're talking about, right?
He's got an organization. I haven't seen one of his for a little while, but there really aren't enough of them, the Cage Furies out there, who are setting up organizations, the minor leagues, if you will. But again, if you're in that league and you're winning, or you're a title contender even, I think you're close. You could be considered to be close.
All right.
So it's definitely a great organization, and they just acquired XFE, so they're even bigger now. And
you are the last XFE heavyweight champion, so you get to keep that title and you never have to relinquish it.
Well, as an amateur, yes. Carmelo Marrero held the pro one, and I think...
we won't get into all that. We'll just talk about you.
So,
Brian, I want to wrap it up because I'm having a couple technical issues here. I don't know what's going on, but I would like to have you on in the near future, talk about some more points. I think you kind of, I'd like to drive it home. It's the whole point. When I started this show, I would actually drive while I'm driving, just do like a monologue, but it's kind of morphed into interviewing interesting people in the sport. And I have a couple other projects that I'd like to talk to you about at a certain point, but I appreciate you being on. Do you have anything coming up, any shows you're going to be commentating, fighting on, or any of you guys that you're helping that you'd like to promote or get some news out there about?
Not right now. We're just I'm gearing up for some holiday break time. Really.
Okay.
I'm going to be getting some training in for sure. I'll be, I train at Nuckmoy and down at your place on Sundays, which is phenomenal. As much as I can get there, it's a little bit of a ride. But yeah, we're nothing scheduled right now. But for 2015, there's a couple great things on the horizon. Working out some plans and setting my goals. I'm a big believer in setting goals, and we're working on setting those goals now. So
awesome. So maybe so we'll let it out now, right? It's if somebody watches to the tail end, these Google Hangouts can have 3, 4, 5 people on it. So whatever fighter you have coming up, let's get together with them, do like a little hangout and kind of just round table it and get to see, let people see, hey, this is how a a true MMA businessman, consultant, manager who cares, talks to his fighters and helps them, and the things he does for them, so that other people, if not using your services because you're busy enough, can say, hey, I demand the same quality of service from my manager.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mind if someone sees this and they inbox me and they have questions. I do my best to help everybody. I only sign agreements with certain people, obviously, because I want to dedicate more time to them. But you'll see. I'll tell you. I'll give you one name right now that you'll see. I avenge his loss in the next 3 months. Where you'll see Billy Algeo out there getting a win. That I can say with confidence. But
yeah, he's a very, very talented young man. That one.
He's absolute great. One of the greatest guys that I've had a chance to get in contact and help work with in these past 2 years. But anyway, yeah, there'll be some fighters coming up, guys doing things. And again, I just love the sport and love being around it, love training it. And it is the ultimate getaway from business and the headaches and the emails and the phone. There's nothing else like getting in there. So I actually leave my phone in the car when I go into the gym. I do not bring it into the gym. So
that's awesome. So what we'll do is, if you can just send me what's the best contact information for you, I'll put it in the comments section. If anybody wants to send you a friend request or just ask you a question in private and they want somebody that's trusted in the sport to give them some real advice, people can contact you?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. It's not a problem. Give me a few days to get back to you, and I certainly you'll hear a response from me.
All right, everybody. Brian Palakow, Driving It Home with the Professor. Thanks for being on, pal.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.